Hello and welcome to the AskWeldon Show, episode 134. Today we're going to talk about the best training environment, League of Legends versus football, why school screws up your learning, and training after work. As always, you can join us live at twitch.tv/mindgamesweldon for the before and after parts of the show. Right now, we're going to dig through these 4 questions and give you answers that will hopefully guide your training and your seeking of high performance. My name is Weldon Green, and I'm a sports psychology trainer, transitioned to professional esport, and I train essentially professional esport athletes, and I also coach League of Legends. Welcome to the show. So today, I want to basically jump right into it. After this, I need to run to the coffee shop, work on a presentation. Next week, I don't know what form the show will take. Just a quick update because I'll be traveling. So there's this great streaming app that I'm going to try to use to essentially stream on Twitch with some overlays and still do the show, but I think it might be only a write-in show. I think the Anchor system might not work, so I will keep answering questions on Anchor, like just on Anchor, so you get your answers. But I will probably do the show through the Twitter. So if you use the hashtag AskWeldon on Twitter to do your question for the next week's shows, that would be awesome. We need to stockpile a bunch of new questions there so that we can have enough to get us through Monday through Thursday. I'll be going to Mexico City. Riot Games is hosting me for the Player Development Conference in Latin America North. Very excited for the opportunity, really pumped to share my wisdom and my experiences with these guys. I'm sure that there's some incredibly experienced and talented players there, and hopefully they can also kind of join in kind of sharing with kind of the novice players and the new players coming up, how important it is to train with focus, to set goals and strive to achieve them, and to keep yourself and your emotions kind of like controlled as you're aspiring to be a high-performance esport athlete. So that's what we're going there to do, and I also apparently have a little workshop with the coaches, which is very, I think, professional, that Riot is thinking in terms of the development of their coaching infrastructure as well, because these people obviously have a big impact on the team. One of the things I've noticed in professional esport is that coaches act more or less like glorified analysts, and because they're so young and so inexperienced, they don't come to the table with a lot of actual coaching skills, meaning things like understanding human motivation and being able to operate on the behavior of their team. And I think that, Riot trying to push that and say, like, these are the tools that you should be using, and this is how you coach. Coach meaning that you're coaching people as well as coaching a philosophy of the game, is only going to make League of Legends, more and more, I guess I would say the gap between standard play and professional play higher, kind of like you see in football. But I also think, the pursuit of optimum play is a beautiful thing, and I love watching it kind of asymptotically approach, perfection, which is basically what Samsung Galaxy looks like recently. So we'll see if that more or less continues. But on with the show, I say, on with the show. Let's jump into the first question. And actually, the first question, normally I say that you can ask a question by using the Anchor app. The explanations will pop up here whenever I'm doing a question, but this particular one came from Twitter, like I'm asking for you to do next week. And it's a little bit of a deflection. So Chad Markle99 asks, sometimes I think if I don't open up my item shop 5 times, I'm going to become just as bad as this guy. Or if I close Twitter right now on this person's tweet who I think isn't good, then I'll become just as bad as them. What is happening? Freaked out face emoji. I don't really know how to describe that. Okay, so essentially, I want to, oops, I just closed my, the question. I want to deflect this a little bit because I do not believe I'm qualified to answer. To me, this sounds like a little bit of OCD. I recognize it because I have similar characteristics to that. I have to have my mouse in a certain way, and I brush things off a lot. I've had, certain nervous habits and tendencies throughout the years that I've needed to do. A little bit of OCD-ness. There's esport athletes that measure their monitor and their keyboard every time. That's a little bit of like perfectionism, you'd say. The fine line between perfectionism and OCD is when perfectionism usually strives for something that is controllable, whereas OCD-ness, like obsessive compulsive disorder, typically strives for things that don't make any sense. They're controllable, but why? So I am not a clinical therapist. I am not a clinical psychologist. I am not a clinical mental, a psychiatrist. And I don't have any clinical training. So I am not allowed to offer any sort of advice for this, like in that role. What I would say is, if you notice this increasing, definitely find somebody who's qualified, like a master's level therapist, for example, who's pretty cheap to get in, you know, a little bit less expensive than a full-blown psychologist, and simply talk to them and figure out, you know, what it is that you can do to cope or reduce the symptoms. Now, as far as if this is not clinical, if this is just, you know, you're a little bit OCD, whatever, but it's not like something where you feel like you need to go to a therapist, I would say it's a perfect training opportunity for not doing it. Literally, the way that I conquered every single habit like this that I had is through mindfulness and resistance. So actually, this is a good time to explain this, the Mindfulness Acceptance Commitment Program. So I essentially, when I started doing this myself, I started meditating and becoming aware that I had these compulsions and that they were emotionally driven behaviors. And then I accepted the fact that they were going to happen, which is fine. And then I decided I'm not going to give in to them. And this took a lot of different forms. It wasn't just with things like, you know, stretching my mouth a certain way or like flexing my fingers a certain way or cleaning off my phone a certain way. It also had to do with things like itching. Like, I'm meditating for 15 minutes and I have an itch, not scratching it, right? That's like, you have the sensation. It's a physical sensation. It drives an urge. That urge is an emotion. You can choose to, at that point then, you can choose to either act on it or not. And I took it as a training opportunity to not act on it, because you can train your brain to focus on other things and kind of let that urge dissipate. So I treated these OCD kind of things, I say kind of things because I don't think it was full-blown clinical. So if you remember that if you do believe that or you have that kind of like compulsion, you should definitely consult somebody else's advice, not mine. But this is just from my own personal experience. I used it as training. I do the same thing in the gym when I have discomfort and I want to go more. You know, I push through that limit and I treat all of these pain sensations as simply signals that I can choose to either obey or ignore. And this is a training that that I do with pro teams. I meant to bring this kind of like graphic up so that I could show the words and you could see the pictures. I'm not going to plug it right here because this isn't the normal place where I advertise this program, but you can find out more at that link if you're interested. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I hope that it kind of deflected you a little bit in the right direction if you need it, and that if you don't need that, it kind of gave you some advice of things that you could try or experiment with. I feel like I'm out of focus. All right, that seems to be a little bit better. We'll see. Okay, now we get to dive into the audio questions. Let's go to question number 1.
Hi, let's say you have a PC cafe nearby or a laptop. Is it good to have a specific environment just for training, where you don't sleep, eat, procrastinate, Reddit, or whatever?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes. This is an easy one. The answer is yes. It's really good to have a separate training environment. Essentially, you can think of it as like a simple way to hack your brain and give you a little bit more structure. But in reality, it's kind of like putting on a uniform or costume. There's clear research that shows that you putting on a uniform or costume allows you to be more focused on the task that you're doing. You know, wearing a tracksuit amplifies the motivation of people to exercise. Wearing, you know, a certain job uniform amplifies people's self-identity in that purpose. So using a training facility amplifies your self-identity as an athlete, as a person who's tryharding, and gives you that little bump in terms of your own focus. However, that is only if you are like kind of like relying on these exterior subconscious impulses as your main kind of things. And again, this is a very, very small effect, measurable, but I believe unimportant. The most important thing is your actual training, that you have a system for your training and that you obey it. It doesn't really matter what the system is. They're all different variances of optimization, right? You got like 98% 96%, 92% optimized, whatever. You could be doing always something better, but the main thing is that you have a system and you're kind of like acting on yourself as a scientist. And you're saying like, okay, I'm going to try this thing, I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to see the result, and I'm going to apply it over time in order to get enough statistical data of what I'm doing to actually make any sort of like valid assumption. And it's the same thing with the training environment. Like that could be something that you experiment with and you realize it's moderately effective but not worth the trouble or the cost, and so you choose not to do it and you just train at home. It's one of those things that maybe if you had infinite time and infinite money, it would be the perfect thing to do, but let's be reasonable. There are many teams in the world who have won world championships and never had a separate training environment that train in the room that they're in, in the gaming house that they live in. So while the training effect is useful and it's real, it's only as real as you make it, and if you're good enough, you can essentially focus where you live as well. All right. Great question. Let's turn to question number 2. Because I'm using this app for the call-ins, every single time I use it, I have to wait for the little upload there. That's why there's a little delay between the two. All right. From Nicholas Jill.
Hey Weldon, this is Nick calling in. You might remember me from Snapchat, I don't know. But my question is in regards to that soccer player that was also D3. And you said that a lot of those skills are transferable from like highly competitive, like say soccer at a competitive level to league at a competitive level. And my question is, if I was wanting to train myself in those skills, would it be better to use league as a platform because I enjoy it? Or would it be more advisable to use soccer as a platform since it has a more structured system to it? And like for some background, I play a lot of league. I'm like gold 5, and I've also played soccer for the last 2 years.
Okay, Nicholas, thanks for the question. And for those of you wondering, the thing that he is referencing, Snapchat, is that in the Snapchat, I usually take questions, and I probably had a number of little small conversations with Nicholas. I should probably pull him up. I don't really know his Snapchat handle. Maybe he's labeled with his name, but I'll do remember him if I get to the context of his conversation. But anyway, when I'm in the gym, when I'm working out, when I'm on the plane, in the transit somewhere, usually I just pull up a Snapchat and answer as many questions as I can. You can send a text question. It's pretty easy for me to reply with video. You can send a video question if you want. Watch it when I can. I got to have headphones in for that usually. And then otherwise, yeah, my story basically is a fitness fitness vlog, more or less. Okay, so to the question, which I forget what it was, but it'll come back to me in a sec. Wait, no, I totally spaced. But I wrote down my answer here, so if I go to my answer, that'll spawn the question in my head. Scroll, 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 scroll. Oh my gosh, I have so many freaking questions. Right. League of Legends or soccer. So in the previous show, you can check it out, episode 133, I believe, I talked about how you can train transferable skills in a high-performance pressured environment. And he's asking which is better, League of Legends or soccer. The answer is really straightforward. Football, European football, aka soccer, is better. Sport is better than esport at this point for training these resiliencies because of the pain involved with physical training. So if you think about training your mind to essentially tolerate emotional discomfort, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about two things: training the brain to tolerate emotional discomfort and choose an opposite action from what the emotion is telling you to do. That's number one. And the second one is operating it with a certain set of habits and behaviors in the absence of motivation. So that is, in the absence of any sort of emotional driver, choosing to train or act in a certain way. Those are the two kind of like core transferable skills that you train when you're a high-performing athlete. And the more that you have them, the more elite you are. Because Arnold Schwarzenegger can tolerate pain and force himself to act more than most people, he gets to be the world champion. Other people don't because they can't. They can't force themselves to go do the things that he does. Okay, so the reason that sport right now is better just inherently than esport at this is because you have muscular pain involved. Pushing through muscular pain and like training yourself to like essentially overcome that agony is a very fantastic training method for the brain. It's great to learn to suffer and to tolerate suffering and to choose to push through suffering of your own volition. And so at the moment, that's just the case. Now, the wonderful thing is that esport, although it doesn't have that component, has many of the other components that exist in sport. And certainly you have a lot of more emotional torture in League of Legends in terms of, being heckled by your teammates all the time or your opponents. I don't know about that because I always turn my opponent chat off. But the other thing that you have online and in League of Legends is high pressure all the time. So in a football camp or in a soccer training camp or whatever, you might do a lot of training. And the only thing that you're really pushing through is your own pain. But those high-pressure moments come few and far between. You have a game every week, every 2 weeks, only a couple weeks a year. And the rest of the time, these high-pressure moments are just not that numerous as they are in esport right now. In esport, you can queue up a ranked game and go to a trade in lane that the entire game hinges on. And you can be like, if I lose this trade, it's over. Like, I'll get pushed out of lane, he'll teleport back with an item advantage, he'll push that advantage to level 6, he'll roam on his level 6 timer, he'll gank another lane, they'll win every 2v2 with the jungle. It will literally be an uphill battle for the next 40 minutes if I mess up this one trade, over this like level 3 minion wave. And you can repeat that every 45 minutes if you want, in terms of like the amount of pressure you give yourself. So in that regard, I think esport has an advantage, the ability to create this very, very high pressure situation. So I think the answer is, a little bit of both. The fact that you have to overcome pain in traditional sport is an automatic thing. Like, you just have to do it. You're forced to do it. You're kind of doing it in a social context. If you're autopiloting it and you're kind of like hovering on the side of tolerance, you don't get as much training efficacy out of it. And yeah, I hope that is helpful, Nicholas, and thanks for the question. All right. Question number 3.
Hey Weldon, another question for you. This one's about learning. So the classical way of learning, the one you've talked about quite a bit, is where you stack each new skill on top of each other until you've mastered every skill needed for your craft. The different way of learning is brought to us from the advent of artificial intelligence, machine learning. I believe you've talked about this a little bit using the AD carry freeze as an example. So artificial intelligence seems to learn much quicker than us and much more direct approach. Why do you think that we can't learn this way, seeing as artificial intelligence is basically a copy of human intelligence? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. A little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I don't mind answering it because I have opinions about it. But keep in mind, this is opinions from a sports psychology trainer who's dabbled in neuroscience in terms of reading, never in research. And although I am fascinated with the field of education, I'm not going to claim any sort of expertise with it. So when you say classical style of learning that I've talked about, I've only talked about it with a little bit of disdain because, and I'm not really sure that it's classical. I think it's maybe traditional is a better word, because I think that it just like is the way that it's done because it's easier for the teachers, honestly, and it's less emotionally painful or confusing for the students once they reach a certain age. But I think that the more organic style of learning, which is that of immersion, is much better and is exactly what AIs do. One of the reasons AIs are faster is because they can spawn, 7,000 copies of themselves and do it all at the same time, 7,000 times, and then amalgamate all that learning into one instance at the end. So there's this parallel processing that AIs can do because they can literally clone themselves. We can't really accomplish that, which limits us a tad in terms of our speed, but the same principle holds that you learn the whole system all at once. And this is, I believe in this so much, is the way that I've constructed my Mac program. So this whole stacking blocks on top of each other after you've perfected the one underneath is total crap. And I think one of the only reasons that it is done is because of the advent of mass modern schooling, which really needed a structured approach to educating 26 students all at the same time. needed a way to like graduate them from year to year in a sort of an assembly line fashion, and needed a way to have teachers able to kind of like rinse and repeat the same style of things, to have a basic set of curriculum that can be adhered to, and to test the students at the end and ensure that like something took place, some learning took place. And so you had to create these systems that built knowledge on top of other knowledge in a kind of like pyramidal building block way, which of course is not the way that you learn anything optimally. If you want to learn a language, you immerse yourself in the language. You don't, study it in school. And I think that school has conditioned people to try to learn in this way, which is why a lot of people go from school and try to learn a foreign language and fail, because it's almost impossible to learn something as embedded in the brain as a language, in the way that we invented in order to operate a school system, or let's say a worker production system, because the goal of the school system was actually to produce workers for the industrial age, more so than it was to kind of create a super educated populace. Yeah, so that's my answer, and it's a little bit politically tinged, it's a little bit opinionated, and it's not very well established in terms of scientific credibility, but it's what I have observed, and it's kind of what I believe, and I observe it kind of in myself, I would say, mostly anecdotally from my own experience in schooling, and then struggling with learning afterwards, and then uncovering how it is that I should learn languages, and then applying that to other facets of learning that I've done. And I think that the systematic approach, or the traditional approach of like breaking things down into blocks and then putting them together, is a very powerful way for adults to quickly learn things if you have superfluous time, a ton of time to just apply yourself to insane amounts of drills. I think it's actually one of the things that we have ahead of children that allows us to learn at a more rapid pace if you have tons of free time to kind of apply to something like that. Kids can't really do that very well. But I really don't think that it's usable in all situations. I don't think it's optimal in all situations, and I certainly don't think it should be the main way that we as humans learn. And for that matter, it isn't the main way we learn. If you think of the big things that we learn, such as walking and talking and standing up and balancing and riding a bike, like these incredibly complex like physical feats, it's all through this kind of like trial and error immersion method where you're learning everything all at once, in a way, kind of through your body. So thanks for the question. It's kind of fun to get these kind of like tertiarily related questions on my channel, because they're things that I care about and I want to talk about, but that I don't really have the opportunity to do so very often. Appreciate it. Okay. And the final question for today comes from Michael. Let's jump in.
Hey, Weldon. I started going to university a few months ago, and since then I'm really busy and I'm really stressed, and when I like come home at like 8 p.m. or something, I'm super tired, and it's just really hard for me to pile up the willpower and actually get a good amount of concentrated practice in. And so obviously improving is really hard right now. Do you have any tips of coping with the pressure on the first time, because I like really feel busy and stressed out and kind of burned out, and how I could like get better and more practice in? Yeah, that's my question. Have a great day.
Okay. Oh, sorry, let me add this to the show. Okay, Michael. So, I mean, unfortunately, the answer is that you're going to be expending a lot of your energy on schooling, and that's just going to be the case. So you're not going to have a lot left over for optimal training. Congratulations, you're a weekend warrior, buddy. This is it. This is the time in your life when you realize that you're going to lose the competition to 16-year-olds who have infinite amounts of time on you because you have other priorities, and they're going to be able to train 8 hours a day of effective training, and you're not, because of the choices that you've made in life and the choices and the age that they are. And so you're going to go on the weekend and you're going to train, but they're also going to train on the weekend. And this is the real reason that the age of esport is like kind of low. It has nothing to do with reflexes decaying or like people's not being able to game. It has to do with time commitment to training. That We simply have shifting priorities as we go to things like college, and then afterwards you have work, and then afterwards you have family and work. And you just can't dedicate the kind of time that an 18-year-old can. And unfortunately, in traditional sport, that doesn't matter as much because you're limited in the amount of hours you can train in a day. In esport, you're not. We're not physically limited. Your body doesn't break after 4 to 6 hours of training and need recovery time. Instead, you can train 10 hours a day and you can get better effectively for almost all of them, because even after you expend yourself mentally, you can just rest for an hour and get back at it, or you can simply grind out volume-based training, for drills that will improve your reflexes and things like that. Or at least your hand-eye coordination in terms of the patterns that you see on the screen. So the painful and short answer is no. I don't have any secret sauce for you. The thing that I can recommend is that you should either play 1 or 2 games with committed full focus. So you drink a coffee about an hour before you finish everything and get home. And then about an hour after you drink the coffee, you sit down and you prep your game, you prep your 2 games, and you just set aside everything, make a space of silence, meditate a little bit beforehand to push everything out of your brain in terms of deadlines and whatnot, and you just train those 2 games, then you're done. You check out. Same way I do this stream every day. The other advice I have is the opposite, which is to not care about it at all and then train higher volume. Just train like spam a lot of games. And try to spam like a single champion. You want to basically get on autopilot with a single champion's mechanics against all matchups so that you can get into the deeper aspects of the game. Because what you're going to be limited by is your laning with a wide plethora of champions and a wide plethora of lanes. So you should try to narrow down your lanes and your champions to 1 or 2 maximum, and you should master them and use that mastery to then ignore the laning phase and be basically like automatically win it or at least go even, so that you can then start to learn the real game and train the real things, such as like coordinating with your team and fighting objectives and team fighting and skirmishing and all these other fun things that are just much more enticing, I believe, and that you're able to use your brain to solve rather than kind of like your pattern recognition and experience with the game that the laning phase requires in terms of matchups. So that's the real practical advice I have for you. Best of luck, and please enjoy this phase of life. Don't take it as a negative that you can't, climb to the top of the mountains anymore. And see that you do have a trade-off in terms of that. In terms of like the fact that your priorities are now on schooling, but that trade-off is hopefully at least worth it for you. And certainly it was worth it for me as well to not be as good at Counter-Strike because I was going to class. This is a complete lie. I don't know why I'm saying this. I skipped class all the time and just like spammed Counter-Strike until I was like one of the top on the ladder in North America and failed out of one of my majors at university because of it. So yeah, don't do what I did, but actually it worked out fine for me because now I'm a highly paid professional in esport, and I went and finished off that degree later after I failed out. I got my English degree free and clear first time. Math degree took me 1.5 years to finish or so. So anyway, do whatever you want, but that's the reality of the situation, and now you know it, so congratulations. All right. Thanks for paying attention today. I hope that it was entertaining. I hope that it was interesting. Make sure to share this video with people who you feel like need the answers that are contained within, need the wisdom that are contained in. The biggest thing that I want to do is reach people who would actually benefit from this show, who would actually benefit from the information that's in it. And so the number one thing you can do for me is not like this video, not buy my program, not follow me on Snapchat. The number one thing you can do for me is send this link. If it's good enough and you deem it to be so, send this link to somebody who needs to hear what is contained within. And also subscribe and like and buy my program and follow me on Snapchat.